Dana White has actually recently mentioned that he's actually open to working with Al Haymon, and I find that quite interesting because if you look into it, Dana White obviously doesn't really like Bob Arum, and Bob Arum has historically had a negative relationship with Al Haymon. Like, he tried to sue him for £500 million years ago. So like, it feels like it's the old adage, if your enemy of your enemy becomes your friend. So I feel like Dana White, for whatever reason, wants to align himself with PBC, the PBC brand, and he wants to actually get himself connected with Al Haymon. I also find it interesting that he wants to get connected with Matchroom as well. Now, in terms of Dana White's foray into the boxing world, it's an interesting thing because the structures of boxing and MMA are fundamentally different. Obviously, with the UFC, they're the premier mixed martial arts organization in the world, and in terms of the way they run their organization, if you look at the way they carry themselves, the uniform that they wear, and all of that, is with the Reebok deal, not the Reebok deal, the Venom deal now. And every way that they carry themselves is very similar to their structure is very authoritative, and it's a structure of it's almost like communism in a sense. Like, all the athletes have got the same sponsors. The athletes are 100% beholden to the UFC's model, so they're dependent on them. They don't have a lot of free agency in terms of moving around, so when you leave the promotion, it's very difficult for you to move on and do your own thing. If you're signed to the UFC, you can't usually do deals outside of the UFC and fight for other organizations. So for example, Anderson Silva couldn't go outside of the UFC and get a fight with Roy Jones Jr. when he was signed with the UFC, but ironically, Conor McGregor managed to get the fight against Mayweather. The hypocrisy of the UFC never fails to amaze me, but all jokes aside, it's a fundamentally different business model than boxing. With boxing, fighters can automatically become self-promoted and can start their own organization and become their own people and make all the money. Like, boxers historically make a lot more money than UFC fighters, the top boxers I'm talking about. Obviously, when you look further down the line, generally, the lowest UFC paid fighter probably gets paid more than the lowest boxer. But I do like the model of boxing in that a fighter can come from literally nowhere and be able to command purses of millions or a couple of millions. So it'll be interesting to see if Dana White can actually get into boxing. I don't think it's going to work because of the fact that boxers don't want to get paid that little. Obviously, they get paid historically a lot more than MMA fighters do. Obviously, like, MMA's not been around too long, but boxers don't want to get paid that less. So like, I don't know what Dana White's plan is in terms of getting into boxing, because these fighters are gonna want to get paid a lot more than they're getting than UFC fighters. So yeah, in my opinion, it's an interesting thing that he wants to align himself with Al Haymon, because of the fact that obviously Al Haymon has obviously had beef with Bob Arum, and Dana White has beef with Bob Arum as well, and he wants to align himself with Matchroom, who historically have had beef with Bob Arum. So it's an interesting thing to look into. So I'm interested to see what actually happens. I don't know if Dana White is actually going to go into boxing, but he says he wants to work with Al Haymon and Matchroom to do boxing events. So it'd be interesting to see what actually happens in terms of that. So yeah, in my opinion, that is the best thing for it. I'll be interested to see what happens. I just don't think it's going to happen though. I don't think Dana White could actually become successful in boxing. I think the reason why the UFC became successful was that because of their monopoly and monopsony power on the market. With boxing, you've got 3-4 other promoters that have major power within the market. Within the mixed martial arts landscape, the only person that has real power is the UFC, and that's why they've managed to become successful. So I don't know if Dana White would step away from MMA and go into boxing in such a way where he becomes a major promoter and wants to compete with the likes of Al Haymon and Matchroom and all of that. Maybe he's going to do one-off events with Al Haymon. Maybe he'll do one-off events with Matchroom, but I don't know if he's going to have an actual schedule where he's going to do several events in boxing. I just don't see it happening. So yeah, that's my opinion. Tell me your opinion. What do you think is going to happen? And like and subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot more content coming your way. Peace out.